2 weeks into Philadelphia Eagles training camp, we're going to predict the Philadelphia Eagles 53-man roster coming up next, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans. This Thursday edition of the show, we're brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Louie DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. It's time, Gino, to predict the Eagles 53-man roster for the first time throughout training camp. 2 weeks into practice. The first preseason game is next Friday against the Baltimore Ravens. Howie Roseman doesn't have to do this until August 27th. They used to have to have 2 cut-down days. This time it's just one big wave. There's going to be a lot of tough decisions for him in about 3 weeks. I wouldn't want to be him, but today we're going to play that role.
This team at a few positions, it's definitely going to be difficult.
Very.
At others, I think we looked at it and said, yeah, you could keep those guys and probably no more, no less. You might add somebody there. But with this Eagles team, there are going to be some tough decisions that if you're sitting there August 26th, is Howie Roseman looking to make some moves? Even sooner than that, let's say. Look at linebacker last year. They brought in Miles Jack and that plethora of players the first week of August because they knew they didn't have anybody there at linebacker. Right now, we haven't seen that yet at any of those positions. Can we? I think you could potentially see a move at 1 or 2 spots, but I think you're more likely to see players being moved out of Philadelphia to acquire assets because this team is incredibly deep at some positions that teams around the NFL, they can't get enough of these guys.
No, I totally agree. And you made a great point before the show that I think with this roster, like youth gets the priority, like draft picks, development, as opposed to past years, maybe a veteran would get more of the benefit of the doubt. But I think this year it's really about developing, especially on the defensive side of the football. I think the toughest positions that, at least when I was doing this exercise before we're going to do it together, that I ran into was, you know, what linebackers to keep, what interior offensive linemen, and then of course, what defensive backs, because there's just so many good options with so many, you know, young players with a lot of potential. And so that's going to be, to me, the 3 toughest positions to make a call on.
And you also have to look at probably spot 47 to 53 with this new special teams element.
Yeah.
How are teams going to value those spots?
Sure.
Britton Covey and Will Shipley both made mention of it in their press conferences the other day, that some teams, when they're looking at the XFL tape, because that's the only example that they have, some teams are going to keep bigger body defensive end players, pseudo edge type players. Other teams are going to keep smaller defensive backs, safeties, cornerbacks, those guys that are the 6th and 7th guy in that rotation in the cornerback room, the 5th and 6th guy in the safety rotation. And you look at the position where the Eagles are the deepest, Lou, it's easily defensive back for the first time in years.
Music to my ears.
And it's not just a bunch of guys in the room that are just there and made the best man win. You have a fringe Hall of Fame corner in Slay, your first round draft pick in Quinyon Mitchell, who is going to be the Slay of the future for you. Isaiah Rodgers, who hasn't played in a year, but the expectations are that he is getting first team reps opposite of Slay with Keely Ringo as well.
And he's winning me over with the Spider-Man cleats, man. Let me tell you. And they say Dallas sucks on him.
So much depth. And
I totally agree.
Are you going to cut one of these guys to keep potentially a 4th tight end or like an 11th offensive lineman? Or...
I don't think so. They're going to go very heavy in the defensive backfield. I think at least a dozen of these guys get on the team. So let's do it. Let's dive right into our 53-man roster predictions. 2 weeks into Eagles training camp, 1 week before the preseason gets going. Of course, the preseason will tell us a lot more. Same with the joint practices, but gun to our head right now, after our initial takeaways from practice, here is our Eagles 53. And starting at quarterback, Gino, this is the easier spot. It's Jalen Hurts, Kenny Pickett, Tanner McKee. I'm trying to will this into existence that McKee can beat out Pickett. Don't think it'll probably happen, but that's your top 3 this year.
Easy. 3. 3 at quarterback, 3 on the list, on to the next position.
Tanner McKee's your new Nate Sudfeld, who you say every year is going to eventually be your QB2, and then they just keep bringing in veterans. But I like McKee as that third guy. Running back, pretty easy too, man. Like, we're back to keeping 3 running backs like we were growing up as Eagles fans. It's going to be Saquon Barkley. I think Will Shipley is going to be the second featured back over Kenneth Gainwell, but it's going to be a 2A, 2B thing. I like Kendall Milton a lot coming out of Georgia, but you mentioned, like, are they going to keep a 4th tight end or a 4th something else outside of a corner or another safety? Like, they're not going to keep Kendall Milton over, a Josh Jobe or, another corner.
Somebody would have to really wow you at this position, and you drafted Will Shipley, who they have the expectation can contribute right away on special teams, can contribute in sub-package situations where you potentially have 2 backs in the backfield. He is more that receiving back for you, and he could take 5 to 7 handoffs a game and be a good counter with Kenneth Gainwell. But outside of those 3 and with Saquon Barkley, it's so top heavy. You're not just going to add a bumper sticker to this group just to have a Rashad Penny in the room just to have it.
Such a good point. By the way, Rashad Penny retired, so it tells you all you need to know about how shot he was last year.
Keep 3. There's no reason to have 4.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, Gino, who we keep at a receiver? We know it's AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Outside of that, though, it's like, who knows? Like, who's going to be the wide receiver 3? But there is a couple other roster locks, I'd say.
Paris Campbell, probably.
He's on the team.
I would say 98% of the way onto this roster.
Same with Britton Covey, just because of the return ability.
Without a doubt.
More receiver chances.
I think he could push for some time at that 3rd wide receiver position. Sure. He mentioned by name that he was watching Cole Beasley, who was in a Kellen Moore offense during his time in Dallas. How could he mirror that type of play? Made the best man win there. John Ross probably is the guy outside looking in that you could sneak in because he is a vested veteran. You could just sign him back as a free agent after the cut down date on the 27th. You keep Ainias Smith. You keep Johnny Wilson. You don't expose those young guys to waivers.
Agreed.
Reports are that Ainias Smith hasn't had the hottest start to the summer.
Going to be watching him closely in the preseason for sure.
The speed, the athleticism is there in the special teams game. And Johnny Wilson, if you haven't seen the picture yet, it's going around Eagles Twitter. I believe the Eagles tweeted it out themselves. He went up in the middle of 4 guys, and whoever the photographer was that captured it, beautifully done. It looked like he was 17 feet tall, towered over everybody, caught the ball at its highest point, and you would want it in a frame in your house. And it's exciting to see just this basketball team that they're developing at this wide receiver position where you have these 2 incredibly gifted players up top. But how is Kellen Moore going to elevate these guys? Because he has done that in his past stops, gotten these role players to step into a role that maybe they weren't comfortable with, but now they have to take it on because wide receiver 3, running back 2 and 3, tight end 2 and 3 as well. Look at the results in Kellen Moore based offense. These guys got to step up. So may the best win here. Yeah. I'm still saying Britton Covey. You're speaking the Tanner McKee is wide receiver or quarterback 2 over Kenny Pickett. I think Britton Covey is much more than just a return man. You see the skill in the return game. Now, how can you use that in a motion-based offense where you can use that short area quickness as football intelligence, find areas in space, as he talked about the other day? But 6 guys, no more. Agreed. Maybe they keep 1 less, depending if they want to go a little bit heavier at defensive back. Or
if Ainias Smith's just a disaster and John Ross doesn't make much of an impact in the preseason. I will say this in tight end, and we kept Dallas Goedert, Grant Calcaterra, who right now is the favorite to be tight end 2. Albert O gets in over CJ Uzoma. I will say these 2 spots, those are the 2 spots if Howie Roseman is going to make a trade before the season. Gino, I do think it will probably be at one of those positions.
You see how important 2 tight ends are in the National Football League, and arguably having 3 tight ends is even more pivotal.
And with Goddard's injury,
look at Kansas City. Look at Kansas City, man. How many times do they run that 13 personnel and you just don't know how to stop it? The Eagles in the Super Bowl, they're putting guys like Noah Gray out there, and you're like, oh, our 12 or not 12. There's obviously not 12 guys on the field. This isn't Canadian football. Like, our 9th man in coverage can't cover their 2nd and 3rd tight end. But the Eagles haven't had that. Grant Calcaterra, he's been given this opportunity. He should be the next man up with Jack Stoll not being re-signed. Things are looking good. Whispers are good. Dallas Goedert seems to be a fan of him. But behind that, could McAllen Castles, the highly paid undrafted free agent, be the next guy up? Or Albert O, who they did trade a pick away for to
And then
acquire
didn't play
from
him,
Denver.
only to re-sign him. What a weird
And CJ
situation.
Uzoma is almost 40, but I just turned 30 today. Who am I to talk? So you keep 3. Albert O is that last guy.
He doesn't
Dallas
belong
Goedert
on the
ranked
roster over another positional player.
He's one of the
Gino,
last
but
guys in. That's the easiest
3.
decision, though.
Yeah, I agree. And then we kept 10 offensive linemen. So we have our top 5 starters, of course. Lane Johnson. We think Tyler Steen right now at right guard. It could be Mekhi Becton, but it's Steen right
1A,
now.
1B. Yeah.
Yeah. Center is going to be Cam Jurgens. Left guard, Landon Dickerson. Jordan Mailata is at left tackle. So here's your top 5. And then, like you said, with Becton at 1B at guard, plus he's your swing tackle. He's your number 6. Like he's your 6th man off the bench, basically, at the offensive line position. 4 other spots. Like I think we know Fred Johnson's going to be a backup because of his ability to play tackle.
Yep, swing tackle.
The interior, though, the interior battle is going to be tough. Like between Matt Hennessy and Max Sharping, you just signed Nick Gates, who's a more traditional center. Then the rookies that you drafted, Trevor Keegan, Dylan McMahon. Like that's a good battle.
The thing about McMahon and Keegan was they were later draft picks, but the Stoutland element is one thing that you just can't leave young players like that to waivers.
Especially Keegan. Like Keegan's going to make this team.
Oh, 100%. I believe without a doubt he'll make this team. McMahon is the one where you sign Nick Gates. Are they confident in McMahon's development yet? We'll see as they go on. Nick Gates throws a wrench in it because of his true center ability.
Sure.
Brett Toth
almost 30 starts at that spot. Yeah.
Toth was the next guy up at that position, and he couldn't snap the ball. It was evident last year.
Yeah.
One of these undrafted free agents make the team. I think you go with 10, and one of those veteran guys, Max Sharping or Matt Hennessy, you could sneak in.
And Hennessy to me would be my pick over Sharping as of release right now.
Yes, I would agree as well. So you go the next unit, Becton, Fred Johnson.
Yep. Keegan, McMahon,
Hennessy. I think that would be our 5.
And then Sharping and Gates are the 2 guys right on the outside looking in.
Probably are veterans on the practice squad. Yes. They kind of know the situation, and their agents see what's going on with the center position.
I'm with that. All right, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we continue to predict the 53-man roster, heading over to the defensive side of the ball, which I think that's the unit. There's a lot more tough calls. So we'll get into that coming up next. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which means you can get tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets for the Philadelphia Phillies. Hopefully they can get back on track, get to the stadium in South Philly through Game Time. But you can also get tickets for the NFL. I'm going to New Orleans for Eagles Saints because of Game Time. They've got concert venues you can go check out, comedy, theater, all of that and more. You can save up to 60% on last-minute tickets for everything that you want on Game Time. Plus, you get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know on top of the great price, you're getting a great view. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB, NFL tickets, whatever you're looking for at Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create that account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Got to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So on today's show, we're predicting the Eagles 53-man roster. We kept 25 offensive players, Gino. Defense is where there's going to be some tough calls. On the defensive line, though, I don't know. I think we're pretty much set up front.
There are some players who probably are 53-man roster deserving. Sure. Patrick Johnson is probably
he was the last guy that was tough.
On the outside looking in, I'm still a huge Teron Jackson fan. Do one of these veterans and PJ Mustafer, an undrafted free agent, and Gabe Hall make the roster. But like
Lewis,
you said,
Clara, maybe.
I think you're pretty set. At edge, Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, Bryce Huff, and the rookie Jalix Hunt.
Yep, that's your top 5. Patrick Johnson doesn't make it, in our opinion, because Zach Bond has that inside-out versatility, Gino. We kept him at inside, but that could be your number 6 guy on the edge. So Patrick Johnson just misses the cut, but he's been a great special team and rotational player for you over the last few years. That's a solid late day 3 pick a couple years ago. And then even at defensive tackle, like I think we know it's the 5 young guys. It's Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Marlon Tuipulotu, and I'm really excited about Moro Ojomo as well. Those are your top 5, so we kept 10 linemen total.
It's a young group, but the skill level is very, very high in a lot of these guys in multiple different ways. You look at Moro Ojomo, who he's probably the 3rd 3-tech get after the quarterback style rusher, but his best element is his motor. He does have the athleticism. He did show off that pop in the pass rush game in some minutes in the preseason. Can he take that next step? Like Milton Williams is going to be given every opportunity to do as well. Same with Jalen Carter and Marlon Tuipulotu. If Jordan Davis doesn't step up to the plate, he could have the most to win on this defensive line out of any player as that second 0-1 tech. Play the center, play between the guard and the center, take up 2 bodies. If the conditioning questions are there for Jordan, which I think this year out of all of them, they'll probably be the most minimal because you see the shape that he is in. This group, man, they got 5 guys that they can rotate in who could play big time minutes for you.
I totally agree. Linebacker, it's interesting. I think we know your top 3, right? It's going to be Devin White's your every down player. And then Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean right now are battling it out for that second spot. Whoever doesn't win it's going to be your primary backup. And then Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is your top 4. Then it gets kind of tough.
Ben Van Summeren, money on the table right now because of his special teams ability. They really do like him. He started to get more minutes on defense last year when they didn't have anybody. It almost felt like he was that TJ Edwards where he was the last guy off the bench, found his way into the rotation with a group that isn't as good as we think it's going to be. We will see moving into this year, but he could be the next guy up, the 5th man off the bench. If Trotter doesn't develop, he could be the 4th man off the bench. And Nakobe Dean, if he gets injured, now he's your 3rd guy up there. And all of a sudden he's back on the field and you never truly know. But 5 guys here. Brandon Smith probably is a practice squad player, the athletic linebacker out of Penn State.
And Burks has been hurt and just
Warren Burks hasn't seen the practice field. No.
Yeah.
He's
and
not
you gotta
the team.
No, I don't think he's gonna make the team either for sure. So we kept 5 inside linebackers. Here's where it gets tough. Let's just go secondary, Gino, because there's gonna be players like Cooper
we got
DeJean.
10 spots left because we got 3 guys on special.
Exactly. So we're at 43 players right now. DeJean, Maddox, right now, Bradbury, Mekhi Gardner. We have a lot of guys that are playing both corner and safety. So we're just going to say we're keeping 10 defensive backs. And I think we have 5 locks that are playing primarily corner, right? It's going to be Darius Slay, and then in whatever order, Quinyon Mitchell, Keely Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers. And then, so that's your 4. And then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And then I guess Reed Blankenship. So you have 6 locks.
6 locks. Those are the guys that are going to see a majority of.
And then 4 guys fighting to the death.
Fighting for 4 spots that, is it just 4 roster spots that are just going to be there and see special teams minutes? No, these guys are going to have to contribute in a big way. But let's preface with this, Lou. Sidney Brown more than likely.
Yes, thank you.
Preseason on the PUP list.
So that opens a spot up for now.
4 games. That spot will open up. James Bradbury, do they move him? He is a huge cog in all of this. If not, he's probably a lock because of that number and his salary. If they do move him, though, with the 10 spots that you have, you mentioned the youth. I think you continue to keep the youth. Eli Ricks has to find a way on this roster.
Completely agree.
Our opinion, we're huge proponents.
He's got to be on this team.
His ability to play man. You saw his ability to step up in the slot when they had nobody. He was arguably the best of that group last year.
Yeah.
And then is Josh Jobe the next guy up at that spot?
Great
with
special
Avonte
teamer.
Maddox? who is your 10th guy as a rotational safety corner hybrid?
Well, I think Bradbury's gone. I think they're between what you said. They want to keep the youth. Bradbury does not play special teams. I think a team that just lost a starting corner like Minnesota or LA could use him. Buffalo, Arizona, like there's spots where
you've talked a lot about that.
Yeah, they'll say, hey, take a conditional 7, right? I think and Howie Roseman would run to the phones to make
and probably
deal.
give him his choice too. I think he's deserved that.
Especially after that press conference, like I'm rooting for Bradbury. But yeah, I would say it's Ricks is that 7th guy that you want to make sure is on this football team. And then the other 3 right now with Brown on the PUP, once he comes back, he's a lock. But with him starting the season probably on the PUP, I think it's Job because of the special teams ability. And then it probably is Avonte Maddox.
I would say so as well. And Avante's probably the last guy on the roster since they already did technically cut him earlier this season. But nickel is so up in the air. We'll see in the first couple preseason games how they value that rotation. Cooper DeJean still hasn't seen the practice field. He has to get back from that injury. Seems like it's progressing very well, and he should see the practice field. And Quinyon Mitchell, though, Lou, your high-end draft pick, he's been getting a ton of snaps inside, so
I've rewatched that one-on-one with him and AJ Brown probably 1,000 times.
Avonte Maddox, like, are you going to be the 4th safety and the 4th guy in the nickel role because you have
he'd
CBJ
have to show he can play
Cooper
special
DeJean?
teams too, Gino. Like that's the thing is Maddox can show that versatility, but as we're saying, Cooper DeJean can be that guy, and Mekhi Gardner could potentially be that guy. If you're not a special teamer, it's going to hurt you in the depth of pretty much any position on this roster. So that's the 10 that we're keeping with Sidney Brown on the PUP. It's Darius Slay, Keely Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers, Quinyon Mitchell, Eli Ricks, and Josh Jobe, CGJ, Reed Blankenship, Cooper DeJean, Avonte Maddox. And then once Brown comes back, it's probably Maddox or Jobe on the outside looking in. Unless they say, my God, these tight ends or Aniyah Smith is terrible, and they go with 11 defensive backs, like maybe they do that, but I would say it's one of those 2 that are on the outs.
Tough decision. This exercise is difficult, especially at this.
But it's in a good way, man. Like, when was the last time me and you had that hard of a time picking the secondary? Like, I don't think we've ever had that on this podcast.
And players that warranted this discussion, because you look at 2017,
we're not trying to force people on. Yeah, I agree.
Those groups were deep. I mean, Cravon LeBlanc was like your 6th guy, right? But was Cravon LeBlanc anything more than a flash in the pan?
No, you didn't feel great about anybody, unless you were me and you with Zool and Jones. But,
no, you do. You're saying, let's keep all the youth. We know Slay has got at least 1, maybe 2 good more years in his legs, and we play those young guys, and that's how we're going to win football games.
Totally agree. All right, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we wrap up our 53-man roster predictions with who we said were the last 4 in and the last 4 out on this 53. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
This episode of LOE is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have winded down, we get fewer games to enjoy. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Right now, the Olympics are going on. If you're not caught up in that Team USA basketball action, you're truly missing out. You can get involved over at FanDuel by betting on any of the NFL futures with this league coming back right around the corner, only a few weeks away from live NFL games. All 4 major sports will be back before we know it. And this summer, getting on the action, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Head to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the entire Locked On Podcast Network.
All right, so we got the 53-man roster predicted. And of course, once the preseason rolls around next Friday, joint practices, it's definitely going to change things. Like our next prediction, Gino, is, it's not going to look identical. When it comes to like the last 4, and you came up with this and it's awesome. I like this idea. So we made the predictions of who makes the roster, but who are like the last 4 we squeaked in, and who are the last 4 that we said, man, they just missed this roster?
My last 4 in, Josh Jobe,
agreed,
Matt Hennessy, Avonte Maddox, Alberto.
You could say either tight end for me, like either backup to Goddard.
Even Dallas I
Or
mean,
no,
Frank
I meant
Calcaterra.
Calcaterra. I just think it's such a bad
Wow.
group behind Dallas.
Hopefully Calcaterra steps up. I believe
hope
in him.
so.
Hopefully he stays healthy and he has a role to go and take, man. But if not, he could be like one of these guys on the last 4 out, which Tyler Hall, Zach McPherson, one of those guys at the nickel corner position. It's going to be a tough cut for either one of them.
John Ross,
Patrick Johnson, John Ross, McAllen Castles at that tight end position. If he does show anything, I think a lot of fans are going to be clamoring for him over an Albert O, who has yet to do anything in his time in Philly. But like we said, this is going to change in a week. Howie Roseman could acquire players at any of these positions, and this whole thing could be thrown up in the air. But if I had to put money on it right now, Lou, they probably look to move some of the depth on the offensive line and the defensive backfield before cutdowns do happen.
No, I do agree. And because I would even say like Sharping was one of my last on the outs. You could say the same thing about Nick Gates. Just because of, again, they are veterans that have played in a lot of games at positions the Eagles prioritize. But I think the big theme of this prediction was that the youth is getting the priority now over the veterans. That doesn't mean the Eagles are in a rebuild. They're not prioritizing a win now window, right? This is going to be a very good team that has a top 5 Super Bowl chance, in my opinion, of this entire 32 team league. But at the same time, like, especially on defense, they're trying to now build this core for the long term. And on defense, they really have not done that in a very long time. I would say on the offensive side of the football, they always put forth that effort, even when they're like signing veterans. They're always trying to develop a long-term sustainable offense. But for defense, it always felt like, well, we're going to do the short-term deals for veterans. Even if it's a big move, it was for a veteran. Whereas now it's like, no, we've got to give all these young corners a chance over keeping a Tyler Hall or a Bradbury again, or even an Avonte Maddox. Like, I totally get your logic behind keeping a Josh Jobe over Avonte when Sidney Brown's back. Like, you have to find a future on the defense.
And on special teams too, man. It's huge in this next evolution of what the NFL is. And at the same time, Lou, with the veterans, the rules tend to favor the rookies when it comes down to keeping them on the 53 because it's easier to slide a player back onto the roster, especially if they're a vested veteran, which I believe is after 4 years or a culmination of X amount of games in the league with players like Max Sharping. Nick Gates probably is right on the precipice of that number. You could cut them and then sign them back. They did that for years with like John Dorenbos and Rick Lovato. They do it too all the time. But those young guys, don't allow them. And the the other teams in the NFL that are trying to get talent from good teams like the Eagle, they're going to poach them, man. I mean, Mario Goodrich, he's released from this team the other day. The Giants scoop him up within the blink of an eye off of waivers. So this team is talented. Like we say all the time, we're glad we're not doing Howie Roseman's job, man, because those are going to be some tough decisions. And I think the tape is going to speak to a lot of these guys in a new defensive system, which is going to tend to allow these guys to make plays on the ball. Some players are going to garner the Ja'Cory Shepherd type of award from the fans. They fall in love with somebody every year, and Howie Roseman's going to get some criticism because he cuts some players that they don't love. But the 16-man practice squad makes it a lot easier. 4 veterans on that practice squad, 12 guys that are still on those rookie deals. A lot of room to kind of keep this team around 70-ish players.
Totally agree. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. By the way, happy birthday to my co-host Gino Camilleri. Turned 30 today.
Sir, the big
have some nice surprises after the podcast. So make sure to wish Gino happy birthday on Twitter at GC24_football, at DiBiase LOE for me, and at Locked On Birds as well. Make sure, by the way, we're your first listen. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. With the draft dudes, Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs. They take you inside the front office, making you a smarter NFL fan every single day. Stay up to date on training camp and positional battles as the season draws near. Locked On NFL Scouting is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.